Venice, the flower of an extraordinary daring to build a city right out on the water and in a particularly hostile environment. At one time, it was at the head of the greatest seagoing empire of its day. Nowadays, Venice is the object of admiration of millions of travelers. At the origin of all this beauty, though, was a huge feat of technology. When the city was founded, the builders of Venice had to be constantly inventing and testing out new ways to keep their city from sinking. And yet, behind the beautiful face of La Serenissima, as they call her, the flesh is rotting away, forever under attack from water and salt. And in recent years, it's all been speeding up. The acqua alta, the flood tides, are getting more and more frequent. With every day that goes by, man's relentless activity is destroying a little more of this fragile treasure. Behind the scenes, there's an army of scientists and engineers fighting constantly on every front to save it. La Serenissima's survival depends on them. But will those scientists manage to win out over the elements as well as the destruction caused by man? It's a race against time if Venice is not to become the new Atlantis. The story of Venice begins here, right at the top of the Adriatic Sea, in this lagoon, a huge natural basin that covers over 200 square miles. It's a gigantic reservoir in which the fresh water of the rivers mingles with the salt water of the Adriatic that comes and goes with the tides. The lagoon is a rampart against the force of the sea, but it's also an unstable environment, a swamp, not the ideal place to found a city. A 1,500 years ago, though, it was here in this unlikely place that a band of refugees just trying to survive settled in to build a town unlike any other.
Ils sont fous, ces Vénitiens, mais ils ont fait un miracle. Vous avez vu comme est très difficile de marcher dans la boue. Pouvez-vous imaginer comment est possible de bâtir une ville de 150 000 habitants dans un site pareil, avec des matériaux lourds comme les pierres, comme les briques? La difficulté est immense. Mais ça, c'était la seule possibilité de transformer un site mauvais, très mauvais, dans une véritable capitale pendant la Renaissance.
What was it that led those future Venetians to settle in such an inhospitable place? As usual, it's the great tides of history that explain their choice. Back in the 5th century, it was Attila and his Huns who were sweeping into Central Europe. 100 years later, the Slavs were surging out of the east as the Lombards were on the march through northern Italy. The peoples of Italy now feared for their lives. They had somehow to flee the invaders who had them surrounded. They had no choice but to take refuge in this lagoon. Safe between dry land and the Adriatic, such an unwelcoming swamp would surely keep the barbarian horsemen at bay. To build their houses in the middle of marshland, they had to recuperate dry land from the water. So the newcomers used old salt makers' techniques to dry out the marshes. They selected areas of dry land that were close to each other and drove wooden stakes into the clay to mark out their construction sites. Then they dug channels to drain off the water. Once the surface had dried, they filled in the whole area to level the land and create a little island they could build on.
Ils ont comblé vers la terre avec des immondices, des choses lourdes bien sûr, des pièces de pierre inutilisables. Avec ça, en pressant le sol, ça c'était les nouveaux terrains pour bâtir la ville de Venise.
This method of land recuperation is what made the building of Venice possible, the bedrock of the whole city. From its birth in the 8th century, Venice grew little by little, until in the 15th century it had become an artificial archipelago of 124 islands, all linked by canals. An archipelago that covered 77 square miles. Each little island was laid out like any other neighborhood of any medieval town, a church and a square surrounded by houses. Once an uninhabitable and temporary refuge in the middle of a swamp, Venice had grown into a permanent and unique city. And its unique setting had its advantages. At first, the water had been the enemy, but once it was tamed, it became the lifeblood that both irrigated and cleaned the city, twice a day, along with the tides. Through the center of this living entity, crisscrossed by 250 miles of canals, winds its main artery, the Grand Canal. Nearly 400 palaces are spread along this main road, which soon became the showcase of the aristocracy. The water is at its deepest in the Grand Canal, which made laying the foundations even more difficult. Nothing, though, could deter the architects and builders who worked for the old Venetian families.
Le chantier commençait en créant une digue dans l'eau pour protéger les travailleurs, les ouvriers, qui séchaient ça, enlevaient l'eau, et après, ils plantaient des pieux, beaucoup de pieux.
One by one, the stakes, or pilings, were driven down into the clay soil until they hit solid rock. The clay sealed the wooden stakes off from the oxygen, which fossilized them over time and stopped the foundation disintegrating. Then, on that reinforced base, they placed a double layer of wooden planks to level the ground and spread out the weight of the building. On top of this wooden floor went several layers of Istrian stone, which is compact and water resistant, so protects against leaking. These techniques were revolutionary at the time, but they've lasted down the centuries.
Sur la base de pierre d'Istrie, qui conclut les fondations, ils ont commencé à bâtir la maçonnerie avec des briques. Ils sont très visibles. Et laissant l'espace pour installer les fenêtres petites ou grandes ou très grandes. En créant un projet léger, comme un oiseau qui vole sur l'eau. Ça, c'est un véritable défi technologique et de l'architecture, de l'art de bâtir à Venise.
Many of the buildings are constructed on these kind of foundations. Upside down, the city would look like a huge forest of wooden pillars. It took the Venetians 6 or 7 centuries to transform unfriendly swampland into a jewel of architecture. Today, though, this colossus with feet of clay is a masterpiece in peril. The clay and the water have turned out to be its worst enemies. The Piazza San Marco is situated at the lowest point of the island, just 29 inches above sea level. High tides flood it 130 times a year. In the marvel of Byzantine art that is its basilica, a team of architects and restorers tackle the constant assaults from the salt and the water that are eating it away from within.
L'acqua naturalmente, che è un'acqua salmastra, salata, e produce dei danni considerevoli, soprattutto nelle pietre. Noi vediamo ovviamente fasi diverse di degrado, che sono dovute alla qualità della pietra, e la cristallizzazione salina e i cicli di evaporazione portano alla completa dissoluzione delle lastre marmoree.
The salt doesn't just wear down the stone, it also leads to major stability problems.
Ecco qua. Ad esempio questi bellissimi fusti di marmo d'Aquitania, Pirenei francesi, e le basi si sono fratturate perché l'acqua salata è penetrata all'interno della colonna e ha aggredito un elemento metallico che unisce la base con il fusto. L'ossidazione ha aumentato il volume e ha prodotto queste fratture, che tra un po' affronteremo, alzeremo le colonne, sfileremo la base, sostituiremo il perno metallico con un metallo inossidabile, con dell'acciaio inossidabile, e poi ricollocheremo le colonne al loro posto.
The salt and water aren't just eating the foundations, they're also threatening the basilica's nearly 50,000 square feet of mosaics. These unique works of art have permanently to undergo almost surgical interventions.
Come va? Ah, va bene, tra un intoppo che questa zona qui è dovuto probabilmente al spostamento, no, dell'arcatella e anche della colonna, che ha creato probabilmente anche dei distacchi, diciamo dei vuoti all'interno della muratura del mosaico. Beh, allora, nel tempo evidentemente i mosaici rispetto alle murature hanno dei movimenti e ci sono poi cristallizzazioni saline che possono portare al distacco, e il distacco prelude alla caduta. Quindi si interviene chiudendo i distacchi, in maniera tale, inserendo con delle iniezioni del materiale consolidante che però riempie i vuoti e ridà stabilità, impedisce insomma che i mosaici possano correre il rischio di caduta.
The restorers have to work inch by inch, listening for the tiniest suspicious noise. Then these stone doctors carefully pour their medicine into the heart of the masterpiece to prolong its life. Often, it can take up to 20 or 30 injections to fill just one hole. It's a never-ending job, especially when you consider that the salt gets everywhere, even 130 feet up in St. Mark's Beard.
Naturalmente la parte inferiore al piede della basilica è immediatamente esposta all'aggressione salina, ma anche a questa altezza e anche nelle parti superiori il sale arriva sotto forma di pulviscolo dell'acqua di mare quando c'è maltempo, che viene portata dal lido dove le onde frangono e producono la schiuma, viene portata a grande altezza, fino anche alla cella del campanile di San Marco, per dire, il nostro campanile a 70 metri, c'è una quantità oramai significativa di sale, di cloruro di sodio, accumulata dovuta a questo effetto, agli aerosol marini che investono la città.
From the historical monuments down to the humblest dwellings, nowhere in the city is safe from the salt water that gets everywhere. With global warming, the water level has risen above the impervious belt created by the Istrian stone. Unprotected now, the brick walls are in danger of collapsing. It's a nightmare for the city authorities and for the scientists. In Mestre, at laboratories at the Venice University of Chemistry, there's a whole research team with just one aim: finding the antidote that will keep all the walls watertight.
Allora, vedi Laura?
Sì.
Qua abbiamo tutta la parte di cristallizzazione dei campioni, dei sali in superficie.
Sì, quindi è fluorescenza.
Sì, stiamo... Le murature di Venezia sono costituite da dei mattoni pieni che hanno una particolarità, che è quella di essere abbastanza porosi, direi con una porosità attorno al 30%. Cosa vuol dire? Vuol dire che di questo mattone circa il 30% è costituito da fori, buchi.
The salt water gets in through these holes. When it evaporates, it leaves salt behind.
Quindi il sale che successivamente cristallizza genera una forza, una pressione di cristallizzazione. Questa pressione è molto elevata, tanto elevata da generare appunto la disgregazione del materiale, la rottura.
Elisabetta's idea is to find a filler that's porous enough to absorb the salt crystals and protect the bricks. Once the filler got eaten away by the salt, it could be replaced. That would certainly be cheaper than actually replacing all the bricks. In her search for the ideal filler, Elisabetta has come up with a recipe for a sort of magic potion. She mixes sand, a bit of a volcanic rock called pozzolan, and a few drops of a molecule that repels water. But these ingredients alone are not enough. She also has to find a way of applying the filler.
Non applichiamo un unico strato di intonaci, ne applichiamo due, uno più microporoso che facilita il trasporto delle soluzioni saline verso l'esterno, verso lo strato successivo, e questo strato successivo che è uno strato macroporoso che quindi è in grado di sostenere l'azione fisica meccanica dei sali in fase di cristallizzazione.
These two coats of filler may be just one way of saving the walls of Venice. What's really difficult, though, is that every single wall requires its own special solution, and it's a race against the clock. Can science save Venice? Eaten by the salt, washed away by the tides, the whole city could collapse. But the scientists are up against something else too. Venice isn't just the city. There's also more than 200 square miles of lagoon. It's a protective belt with a rich ecosystem, but it's also complex and fragile. The waters of the lagoon aren't very deep, between 5 and 10 feet, that's all. They've always been studied with barrena, the name for the little bits of exposed land that play an essential role in protecting the city. But those barrena are gradually disappearing. Davide Tagliapietra is a biologist at the Venice Institute of Marine Sciences. His job is to look into all the imbalances that could be harmful to the lagoon.
Siamo nel posto dove il fiume e il mare si incontrano. Ognuno, mare porta sedimento e energia, il fiume porta sedimento, terra e energia. Quando due si incrociano, si baciano, si rilassano e sedimentano, lasciano cadere, a seconda della forza della marea, lasciano cadere il loro frutto. Quindi in questa zona particolare dove il mare e i fiumi si incontrano, qui si accoppiano e generano queste barene, questi strati di sostanza organica e sedimento che man mano si sovrappongono.
The ecosystem of the Barrenas is very dynamic. There are halophilic plants that live on salt, medicinal plants, and reeds. Birds nest here too.
Guarda, facciamo una sezione di un suolo di barena. Adesso ti faccio vedere com'è fatta. Intanto non è solo limo e argilla, ma è un tessuto molto complesso. Guarda, le radici si spingono in profondità, ossigenano il sedimento. Queste sono radici morte che quando muoiono creano dei canali e l'acqua circola. È tutto intriso d'acqua, guarda, con una spugna. Quindi quando l'acqua passa qua attorno, tocca tutte queste superfici, lavora, parla, dialoga con i microrganismi, poi scivola e in parte penetra dentro, passa attraverso tutto questo tessuto e ritorna alla laguna. Quindi questo è quasi fosse, non dico un fegato, ma un organo molto molto complesso e importante per la laguna stessa e per la qualità dell'acqua.
From the very beginnings of Venice, the Barrenas have acted as natural filters for the city and all the islands of the lagoon. They are washed twice a day by the tides and prevent the water from getting stagnant and muddy. It's a fragile equilibrium, though, and it's at risk now of being disrupted by new and invasive species of parasite.
Ecco qua! Sì, il y a quelqu'un! Queste sono delle teredini, sono dei molluschi bivalvi che scavano il legno e sono di locali, autoctone, da sempre. Ci sono specie che però pensiamo si siano diffuse con le grandi scoperte di navigazione del Rinascimento, che chiamiamo specie criptogeniche. Abbiamo recentemente scoperto una specie tropicale che è nuova per la laguna di Venezia, molto molto aggressiva.
In his laboratory, Davide is trying to trace the evolution of these parasites. How did they get here? And how did they adapt to the lagoon's ecosystem?
Probabilmente vengono dall'area indiana e dal Mar Rosso. Sono state trovate in Turchia qualche anno fa. trovate in Portogallo e adesso le troviamo qui a Venezia. È difficile che siano venute tramite le navi perché vivono nel legno e quindi le navi dovrebbero essere in legno. È molto più probabile che vengano trasportate in mare da dei pezzi di legno che girano, perché il legno che viaggia, il drifting hood, è il vero disseminatore di queste specie.
Davide's analysis of the crustaceans in the lagoon's wooden stakes has enabled him to identify 5 different species.
Sono come i porcellini di terra, sono dei isopodi. Questi animaletti sono molto simpatici e molto attivi. Questi sono animali che attaccano tutto il legno fresco ma a contatto con l'acqua circolante. Non mangiano sicuramente i pali sotto le fondazioni, non mangiano i pali che stanno dentro il fango. Venezia è fondata su pali che stanno dentro il sedimento. Non sono una minaccia per l'urbanistica della città, per il tessuto urbano, per il tessuto appunto storico.
Indeed, the men who first built the city protected the foundation pillars from bacterial attack by sinking them into the clay. Without oxygen, the bacteria couldn't survive. And yet, in the heart of the city, a discovery was to shake this certitude and cause great anguish in the scientific community. The bell tower of the Frari Basilica is one of the most spectacular in Venice. It has subsided by 2 feet in 600 years. The team of Alberto Lionello, an engineer who's an expert in building structure, has been trying to find out why.
Allora il campanile sicuramente è sceso perché è molto pesante e quindi poi abbiamo che il sottosuolo di Venezia è di argilla, quindi ha una scarsa capacità portante, ma c'è un altro problema che facendo delle indagini abbiamo trovato che i pali della fondazione del campanile non sono soggetti a degrado.
So the researchers started taking core samples to get a precise diagnosis. They'd taken more than 40 samples from the very deepest foundations when they made an unexpected discovery.
Quando noi abbiamo fatto le indagini sulle fondazioni abbiamo trovato un masso di fondazione in pietra molto ben conservato. Sotto a questo masso ci sono dei tavolati di legno che, vedete, sono ottimamente conservati, sono di larice, ma sotto a questo materiale qui invece ci sono dei pali di ontano che sono invece degradati perché c'è un attacco batterico, ci sono dei batteri che mangiano la lignina, che è la cellulosa che tiene insieme le fibre di lignina e quindi il palo perde la sua funzione strutturale.
The scientists have many theories about this, but Alberto Lionello's is particularly worrying.
Sono batteri che vivono senza ossigeno e non sappiamo se dipendono dal sito in cui siamo, quindi dalle condizioni diciamo al contorno, oppure se poteva essere un attacco che c'era già nei pali quando è stato costruito il campanile.
Is it just this bell tower that is affected, or are they all in danger? This calls for a more wide-ranging study by scientists. If the bacterial attack should be more general, it would spell doom for the city. All the buildings built on stakes would sooner or later be condemned, and Venice would be swallowed up by the waters. The The scientists are involved in a permanent battle with the city's natural enemies: the water, the salt, the parasites and bacteria. But for half a century now, they've been faced with a new enemy as well, a voracious one: man. His relentless activity has spectacularly accelerated the deterioration of the city. Every year, 27 million tourists visit this city that is now more like a vast museum. Sometimes there are more than 100,000 of them in a single day, while only 56,000 Venetians actually live here. In high season, a dozen of these grandi navi, huge floating buildings, come into the Giudecca Canal every day. They weigh up to 130 tons and can be as high as an 11-story building. They displace hundreds of thousands of tons of water, and their endless coming and going is undermining the foundations of Venice. The city authorities have at last become aware of the danger. They've decided to ban from the heart of the city all ships of more than 100,000 tons. But given the huge profits being generated by cruise tourism, some doubt these measures will be applied. Less spectacular, but more devastating, is the constant traffic of motorboats, vaporettos, and water taxis. It too is damaging the city at an alarming rate. There are just too many propellers, and they're too powerful. They create a constant backwash. The moto ondoso, they call it, a regular wave forever breaking against the walls. The waves constantly slapping at their foundations are destroying all the city's buildings. So the city has called on a very special intervention team to reverse all the damage being caused by man.
Ok, mi senti?
Sì, ti ricevo forte e chiaro.
Ok, bene.
The masons here are all divers, and they work in very difficult conditions.
Ok, va bene.
Perché lo svolto in acqua ha delle complessità maggiori, uno sforzo maggiore, sono le temperature che possono essere problematiche. Beh, senza ombra di dubbio, quello che crea maggior problema è la visibilità. La maggior parte dei nostri lavori vengono svolti alla cieca o quasi.
Come
More and more, this innovative technique is replacing the usual draining of canals here in Venice. Once they'd dammed up a canal and emptied it, they built scaffolds and repaired the masonry just like on dry land. But doing this exposed the pilings and thus weakened the foundations the whole city stands on.
Se si mettono i pali di fondazione a secco, a contatto con l'aria, degradano in pochissimi giorni, perché il palo deve rimanere sotto il fango in assenza di ossigeno e quindi si mantiene anche per 2000 anni. Ma appena lo portiamo all'aria, comincia subito a degradarsi e in un giorno perde la sua compattezza e quindi non tiene più la fondazione.
Brick by brick, these diving stonemasons are trying to fill in all the most damaged parts of the city. It's painstaking work and can seem hopeless faced with the relentless industrialization that has so profoundly disrupted the lagoon. Only a few miles away from the historic city, over on dry land, stands the chemical industrial plant at Marghera. Built in the 1920s, Marghera became, after the Second World War, one of the biggest ports in Italy. It was a time when Venice, along with the rest of the country, was undergoing galloping, often brutal industrialization, with no respect for the environment and for the special nature of this lagoon.
C'è stato un inquinamento diffuso di mille tipi, molte fonti. Abbiamo un petrolchimico qui fuori che ha emesso nell'aria moltissimi inquinanti e che oltretutto ha anche stoccato dei materiali impropriamente che sono percolati nei fondali. L'inquinamento e l'effetto sugli animali e sulle piante è stato molteplice e poi è proprio una somma di inquinanti che hanno fatto un po' crollare le comunità biologiche della zona. Ma soprattutto c'è stato un periodo, appunto nel dopoguerra, che l'emungimento dalla falda di acqua in pressione per il raffreddamento ha fatto schiacciare la falda come se sgonfiassimo le ruote di una macchina e quindi anche Venezia stessa e tutta l'area attorno ha avuto una subsidenza artificiale.
Pumping out the groundwater caused the bed of the lagoon to subside by 3.5 inches. At the same time, global warming was causing sea levels to rise. The combination of these two things meant that water level in the lagoon rose by nearly a foot. This only made things worse for the buildings of Venice. But the destruction caused by man didn't stop there. To keep up with the frantic expansion of the industrial plant, a huge channel was dug into the shallow lagoon. It links one of the lagoon's 3 mouths to the port of Marghera. The chemical company's channel means there are enormous commercial ships coming through every day. It's 150 yards wide, over 12 miles long, and between 30 and 50 feet deep. 900,000 cubic feet of the lagoon's bed were dredged out to build it. That's a huge wound in the lagoon.
Le conseguenze sono che questa parte di laguna non è più una laguna, è un braccio di mare che si sta scavando sempre di più, che in 50 anni, da quando hanno scavato questo canale, si è approfondita moltissimo e quindi ha perso completamente la natura di laguna.
If the lagoon becomes part of the sea, The salt water of the Adriatic will penetrate everywhere, and nothing will hold back the power of the waves. Nothing will shelter Venice from the sea, and the city will be in mortal danger. And some years ago, it had a taste of that fate.
Queste immagini sono state girate nel centro storico di Venezia, dove i danni sono incalcolabili.
On the 4th of November 1966, extreme weather conditions and a raging wind brought a devastating tide, with the water level rising to 6 feet high. "5,000 inhabitants had to be evacuated. For 30 hours, Venice was cut off from the world. Venetians, accustomed as they are to high tides, had never seen an acqua alte of such power. Venice, by its very nature, is exposed to repeated assaults by the Adriatic Sea. Its geographical position at the heart of a closed basin renders it particularly vulnerable to the weather. The wind they fear the most is the sirocco from the southeast, which can blow very violently, up to 60 miles an hour. All the worst high tides in history have been because of the sirocco. And when the moon combines with the weather, the whole city's in peril. The Acqua Alte of 1966 was exceptional, but with global warming, there are more and more high tides. A 130 times a year, the water rises by about 3 feet and floods the Piazza San Marco. 60 times a year, it rises by nearly 4 feet. But with the changing climate, the high tides can frequently reach a height of nearly 5 feet, and that can cause a lot of damage. Faced with this menacing situation, a national and international backup plan has been launched. In 2003, scientists came up with a large-scale plan to protect Venice by holding back the water at the entrance to the lagoon. The gigantic MOSE, or Moses in English, project speaks volumes about man's desire to control that colossal force. MOSE is a sort of dam that will defend the city from freak tides. It's a very simple idea. At the 3 mouths of the lagoon, mobile dams will rise up at every high tide. It should be operational by 2022.
È un prototipo unico al mondo che è stato realizzato solamente qui. In media funzionerà fra le 4 e le 7 volte all'anno, che sono le maree che intervengono annualmente, però verrà usato sempre più volte nei prossimi 100 anni, considerando l'aumento del livello del mare.
"78 mobile dams held by very powerful hinges are installed underwater in concrete housings. When the danger level, set at 3 feet 7 inches, is reached, they will rise into place in less than 30 minutes and handle tides up to 10 feet high. Each dam is between 65 and 100 feet long, 65 feet wide, and 16 feet thick, and weighs between 170 and 330 tons.
Buongiorno. Sì, il carrellone ci passa. Bene.
Looking inside one of them gives some idea of how enormous they are.
Immaginate questa grande scatola posata sul fondale marino, piena d'acqua, e lei è in attesa, aspetta il momento del suo lavoro. Quando arriva questo momento, il computer centrale gli comanda di alzarsi. Come fa? Manda dell'aria compressa all'interno di queste tubazioni, che voi vedete vanno fino in fondo, fino alla prua della paratoia. È lì che va concentrata l'aria all'inizio. Dopo un po' alla volta viene riempita almeno metà paratoia. L'altra metà resta comunque sempre piena d'acqua. E il computer continua a dargli aria o si ferma, metti, togli, per mantenere la paratoia sempre con un'inclinazione tra i 42 e i 44 gradi.
There's no time to lose, because everything's more complicated at sea and the work's already running very late.
Falco da cantiere.
The team's busy moving one of the dams to its anchorage nearly 50 feet underwater. There are 15 dams already in place and only 4 left to install. It's a very delicate operation. All the container ships and tankers have been ordered away because of the waves they generate. It's this gantry, a sort of giant elevator, that will take the dam down under the water. With a Meccano set this big, you can't leave any gaps. Everything has to fit to the millimeter. It takes a few hours, but the dam's finally in position. In total, 40 dams like these have to be placed in the 3 mouths of the lagoon. Then there will be 3 years of tests to see how efficient it all is. It was planned for 2012, but Mose will not be fully functioning until 2022. Financed principally by Italy and the European Union, its projected budget of €1 billion has already hit €6 billion. Critics are already questioning its viability. With its huge scale, all the delays, and its staggering cost, will it actually be able to protect Venice from the rising tide? Worse still, isn't such an invasive project likely to change the morphology of the lagoon by further disturbing the natural rhythm of the tides? Just one more assault on this environment that's already under attack? In the northern part of the lagoon, another team of scientists is taking a different approach to that of the pharaonic Mose project and looking for solutions that are durable and respect the local ecosystem. Alberto Barossi is an engineer at the University of Padua. Along with other scientists, he's fighting the big tides using the ancient methods of Venice's very first inhabitants.
Andiamo a vedere i ragazzi in barena.
Sì.
Stanno mettendo giù le sci.
Sì.
Emiliano!
In tutta la laguna nell'ultimo secolo più o meno sono scomparse il 70% delle barene. Rispetto ai 170 km quadrati dell'inizio del secolo scorso adesso ne sono restati 47, quindi è una distruzione enorme. Come va?
For 4 years now, a team of 40 people take turns to work on 100 hectares of barenas, trying to preserve them, even bring them back to life. They work like in the old days, Everything just as it was in the glory days of Venice. If the project produces conclusive results, it'll be extended over a greater area.
Se voi guardate di là, vedete questa grande palude che senza questo piccolo intervento che ricucisce 2 cordoni di barena entrerebbe a contatto con un canale, quindi il fango della palude si svuoterebbe e la palude sparirebbe. Grazie a questo piccolo intervento proteggiamo un'area enorme. Utilizzando materiali biodegradabili come il legno, appunto, pali e fascine, e anche fil di ferro che è biodegradabile con l'acqua salata. Perché è importante che queste opere siano biodegradabili? Perché le barene tendono naturalmente a cambiare forma nel tempo, quindi da un lato dobbiamo proteggerle con delle cose robuste, dall'altro lato non dobbiamo bloccarle in una configurazione rigida che non cambia mai, ma dobbiamo usare delle cose reversibili.
Some Venetians are starting to see that after years of ill treatment, their precious environment is in need of some care and attention. After all, La Serenissima rose out of this lagoon, and her very life depends on it. Salt and water, global warming, geological changes, the challenges are immense. Just like the first builders who achieved the impossible by constructing a city where only a swamp had been. The scientists of today are lending all their skill to the work of this great open-air laboratory, so that this flower of human ingenuity may long continue to amaze us.